Okay, so today we're going to take a look at the Adobe Draw app here, located in the bottom in the toolbar. And Adobe Draw is a vector-based program, so we're working in points and vector, and it works with mathematical equations. And the idea is that since we're using points, we can make our images smaller and larger. We can shrink them up and shrink them down without losing any line quality. So I am going to first come into my settings here, and I'm going to come up here to my preferences. Notice we have a list of preferences that line up over here. So I'm going to choose my toolbar on the left hand side because I am right-handed, and I prefer, if you notice the orientation of my canvas, this is, straight up and down. This is landscape. I prefer to work landscape. It's easiest for me, and I feel like I get more of a paper, I get more of a canvas, which we'll look at. This free canvas rotation, I always keep that on because you want to be able to move your canvas and rotate it freely without getting stuck. Okay, and then stroke smoothing. I have mine set on to after. This for me is really important because I go in, create my lines, and it smooths it out in any places that I might get a little more jaggedy. While the drawing I don't necessarily like, you can test it back and forth. It's really personal preference. I have my show touches on because I am sharing my screen and making a recording. I would not keep show touches on as you're working through, just because it might be a little difficult to keep seeing that orange circle every time you draw. And underneath we have the finger settings. So if you decide that you don't like the stylus and you do want to use your finger, you want to make sure that you have your settings set correctly in here. I'm using an Apple Pencil, so I have it set for that. All right, we're going to come back down here to work. So this is where all my work is going to store. Every time I create something new, it's going to store back in here. Up here in the top, I can select projects, I can delete them, I can sort them. All right, down here, I have this circle with the plus button. That's how I'm going to create a new piece of artwork or canvas. All right, so two options, digital illustration and print illustration, right? So digital illustration is strictly web-based. So if I were creating a screen or HD screen or something for Instagram or something specifically for an iPad or a website, I'd be using digital illustration because I'm not printing it. But here, print is really important because it refers to, when we talk about print, we really want to focus on the pixels per inch, right? So that is the quality in which the print is being printed. So pixels per inch, the more pixels per inch, it would make more sense that the better quality the image would be. So digital illustration is 72, print is 300. So we're going to choose a standard book landscape for me. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pointer finger and my thumb, and I am going to pinch and squeeze it in, and I'm going to rotate my canvas. That was the rotating of the canvas button that I was talking about in the preferences. For me, when I work traditionally on a piece of paper, I tend to do this with my paper. So I want to be able to mimic the same way I'm working traditionally as I do digitally. All right, so over here on the right-hand side, we have our layers. We have the background layer, that's just the white, and we have our draw layer. So when we think about layers, we are going to add layers as we work through our drawings. But as of right now, we're just going to work right on this first drawing layer. So if I tap that drawing layer, what's really nice is I can tap on where it says draw layer and rename it. I'm going to name it sketch. And we can take a look at opacity, the blend mode, the transforming, the layers, and the duplicate after we get some things on our layer. So I'm going to click off. Okay, over here on my toolbar on the left-hand side, I have a variety of pen tools. So if I select the first one, you're going to see size, opacity, color, and these three little bars pop up. So when I click on the size, if I click and drag up, I get a larger brush size. And if I click and drag down, I get a lower brush size or a thinner. If I change my opacity, I'm going to get a gray. Change my color. I can come in, I can go from the window, the picker, I can choose themes and select a color from my themes, or I can choose from my library, which we're going to get into learning how to do that by creating our own color palettes. All right, so clicking back to this toolbar. notice that the point is different on the tool underneath, on the brush underneath. So I'm going to write with that. So notice a difference in the tip, right? So the edges are a little bit more pointed when I go to the one underneath. My edges are a little bit more straight, right? It looks the way the brush does at the end. All right, so I'm going to come back over to my layers. I'm going to create a new layer. So I have two options, an image layer or a draw layer. For right now, we're going to select a draw layer. And I'm going to move down to the next brush. And I'm going to change my opacity down a little bit. Now, if I draw over top, notice that I can still see through the drawing underneath because my brush opacity is there, right? And now I'm on a different layer. So it's not merging my colors. It's not merging my drawing together. What's really cool about this now, if I tap on that layer and I go to transform, I can take my two fingers again and I can pinch that drawing, move it around, make it smaller. I can flip it vertical. I can flip it horizontal. I can transform that specific layer and still keep everything else the same. Now, click on the brush underneath. And draw right over top of that as well. Come in. And see how I double clicked? Notice I was still on the same layer. But I erased, or I made that layer visible. It's not erased yet because it's still there. I can still see it with the eye is still there. But I'm making it less visible. Or making it invisible. So if I click on that layer as well, I can see all the different options. I can merge the layers together. I can also duplicate this layer. So what happens there is I created two of the same layer. So if I come back in and I hit transform, I have another of the same layer. And I can do whatever I want with that. That would be really nice if you were creating an eye, or if you were creating a face and you wanted to make two eyes. You only have to draw the eye once and you could duplicate it. All right, so then let's make these all unseen. We're going to create a new layer. And I'm going to come up here to the top bar. Oh, I had it in set to fill. Notice what happened if I am selected on the brush, I can tap and it'll fill my space. It's tap and holding. It's basically the same way a paintbrush would fill an image if you were using one of the other programs. All right, so I don't like that. I want to undo what I'm doing. If I come up here to the top and I click the circle back button, it'll undo what I've done right before that. So if you messed up, you can click undo. It'll take you back to the steps right before. Under the next one, next to that up here in the top is a circle, right? So a circle and a triangle. If I click on that, I'm going to get all these really cool shapes. So what's nice about this, if I want a perfect circle, I can click on that template, click on my tool, and I now have a perfect circle. So I can click on the polygon. I can make the polygon smaller or larger by taking my two fingers again and pinching and just tracing with my brush. Notice how different the brushes make the line, right? And there's all different shapes. I can go into my library. I can add custom shapes through Adobe Capture, which we'll talk about as well. Not in this video, in a different video. All right, next to that, we have the layers. I can make my layers visible and invisible. Honestly, I always keep my layers visible because I think it makes it a little bit easier to be able to see what I have. And up here is the universal share button. We know that from any other type of device you've used, the box with the arrow coming out. So if I click on that, I can share my image. I can save it to my Creative Cloud, which we'll talk about later. But what I like to really get in the habit of is being able to save my image to my photos, right? So I'm just going to save my image, click on save my image. It'll save it down into my photos. It'll save into my camera roll. That's going to be really helpful for you as you're submitting assignments to Canvas. And then the settings, we're not going to really learn too much about this, but you can actually click on Learn Adobe Draw Brushes. It'll give you a whole tutorial to walk through. It might be helpful for you to go through and take a look at all the different brushes that are available and kind of mess around with it. And then here, I can make everything go away, so I can just work with my canvas and bring it all back. All right, and that's it. So play around with it. The best way to learn all of these apps is through trial and error. And if you have any questions, please let me know.